Good evening. My name is Fabrizio Aiello, and thanks for joining. Tonight, I'm going to be talking to John from John's Longbox. The description or his YouTube channel is in the description. He has a YouTube channel where he basically reviews comic books. I'll have to ask. Mostly, I see Bronze Age, but I think he does all ages. He does descriptions, and he has a pretty impressive collection. So I wanted to talk to him today about what he's gleaned from years of collecting and reading and reviewing about what makes a good comic book. And if you have any questions, throw them in the chat. Without further ado, here's John.
Hey, how you doing?
How's it going?
I was thinking about doing like a funny thing, like brushing my teeth and acting surprised.
If you need to brush your teeth, it's fine. we are that.
Always. That's why I'm in the basement reading comic books.
Relax.
The hygiene issues of all comic book collectors. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm very interested to pick your brain.
It's been like a week since I talked to you. I was like, starting to miss you.
I know. I have a couple of drafts of letters I was gonna hit send on, but then I felt like it was too soon.
Oh, have you been the one calling and hanging up?
Yeah, so first off, I wanted to talk about your collection. If people haven't seen it, there's pics on Twitter, and it looks to be an entire room filled with comic books.
Yeah.
And when did you start, and how did you amass an insane collection like that?
Okay, well, I have a software program, and I scan. It's called now of course I'm blanking out. It's right here. What is it called? Comic Base. Okay, so I just got Comic Base 2023. So it gives me an exact number, assuming that I scanned everything correctly. And it says I have 58,000 comics now. Keep in mind, I only scan one. So if I have 6 copies of something,
wow.
I only, and I don't know how, but people give me comics. So I probably have more. And I give away comics too, because there's only so much copies of I don't know. I'm trying to think of something stupid, that you can have. But so I probably have one, but I just use the number that's. And when did I start collecting? Well, there's always been comic books in my house ever since I can remember, because I have 2 older brothers, and my older sister liked Archie. My 2 older sisters liked Archie. I'm one of 7 kids. I'm the 5th of 7. You're Italian. I'm Italian. You know how it is. Large family. My mother's Irish, so forget about it. Yeah. So there's always been comic books in the house. Always. I remember reading them, before I could read, just looking at the pictures, having my brothers read them and stuff. But the story I always tell people, in 3rd grade, I couldn't read. I was in. I think I told this story a few times on my channel, but my Mrs. Sosha, my teacher, she would have 5 reading groups, and I always joke. Well, I remember the top reading group is the Owls, and we all named after birds. And I always joke around because I can't remember that I was in the Cuckoo Birds, and and the kid that we were sharing a reader with, this kid Jordan, and Jordan, when we'd have a bathroom in the classroom, he would come out of the bathroom with his pants down, his little thing exposed, yelling to the teacher, "Wipe my hiney," and then he would sit down next to me, and I was like,
Oh.
Even in 3rd grade, I was just like, there's something wrong with me. You know what I mean? This Jordan is my partner. And I remember once we're looking at snot was coming out of his nose all over his book. I'm like, oh God. And I made friends with Carl and Sean, and this was 3rd grade. I was actually new to the school. I transferred into the school, and we were looking at comic books. I remember specifically looking at comic books because I couldn't read them, and acting out the poses, how exciting they were. This was like, I'm going to say 1974, and they were amazing. John Byrne's X-Men, the Marv Wolfman and George Perez doing the Fantastic Four. These were, and I remember like the Submariner in the Avengers, fighting Ultron, but I didn't know what was going on. But you get the gist of it, because that's Marvel was good that way. And then they just started talking about the details that I never got, so I started reading. Now keep in mind, in 3rd grade, after school, why would I read? It's like after school, why would I do math? To me, reading was just an activity that was a school activity. You know what I mean? I'm not going to sit there and do math problems at home for fun. Why would I read? That's what. So I didn't think that reading was a pleasurable, fun thing until comic books. And then, no joke, I remember by the end of third grade, I was in the Owls, and the girl that I was sharing books with wasn't drooling and sneezing all over. You know, she could pull up her own pants. So, you know, and I owe it all to comics, to the point when I was in fifth grade. So only 2 years later, I was being psychoanalyzed by the school psychologist, because I would check out this big old Shakespeare copy, Bible copy of Le Morte Arthur, this hardcover book. And it was, I don't want to say old English, but it was, I don't know, old fashioned English. And I just remember I would have note index cards and I'd write everything down. I hate self-diagnosis things, but I definitely think I had like OCD like qualities. I'm not going to say, and I was keeping the notes, and this knight could do this, and this knight had this. This was the name of this guy's sword. This guy was from this country. You know what I mean? And I remember going into her office, and she was asking me to talk about the book, and then she pulled out those notes, like I must have dropped some, and I just stopped. Am I in trouble? You know, like at that point, I was about to say I'll stop reading. You know, and she's like, no, you're not in trouble. And I just remember just like talking like a little kid, just all excited about. But I always wondered what that was. But that's the story that I tell. In third grade, at the beginning of third grade, I couldn't read, and by the end of fifth grade, the school psychologist was like running tests on me because I wouldn't, like I was getting all the Norse mythology books. You know,
you peek in, and during lunchtime, she's reading X-Men. Like, yeah. There's a secret to this.
Well, I peek in, and she's just like going like this.
So obviously, you know, once you get the bug, it's impossible to sort of like.
Yeah, I've never stopped reading. I have a room upstairs that I call it the reading room, and it's just books upon books. Like, you think it's nuts that I buy comics? Like, here's stacks and stacks of comics. I got books and books and books upstairs that I haven't even read yet. You know.
So as far as collecting, and I think in one of your reviews you mentioned that you mostly did Marvel because you didn't have access to DC, and I was the same way. I had a newsstand. Whatever they picked up, I got. If they didn't have it, I didn't read it. What about sort of like financial limitations? I mean, even as a kid, were you able? Did you have a paper route, or?
My father wouldn't let me get a paper route because my two older brothers would get paper routes, and then my father would end up doing them. So when I asked for a paper route, he wisely said no. So when I was a real little kid, you know, I went to Catholic school, and my mother would give me $1 every day. That was it, $1. So I had $5 a week. And I remember distinctly that bagel pizza was 20 cents and chocolate milk was a dime. So I would get 2 bagel pizzas and a chocolate milk and 50 cents to buy a comic book. You know, and comic books were 20, 25 cents. So every day I'd buy 2 comic books and have a lunch, you know. And then I remember towards the end of 8th grade, I think comic books were up to like 50 cents. And I remember saying, like, I can't collect comics anymore. They're too expensive. So that's what I did, you know. And then in high school, I always had jobs delivering pizza, you know, things like that, working at a supermarket.
Yeah, I started collecting when they were 65, roughly. That's whenever I was a kid, and so I remember if I could scrounge 65 cents, I'd go get a comic book. Speaking of paper route, I had a paper route, and I embezzled so much money from that paper route that I was doing it for free for years. But in the meantime, I bought a lot of comics. So you've been collecting consistently then, you know, since
I've been collecting comic books, I would say consistently since 1974, with I think there was a 2-year period in the 90s, in the mid 90s, where I stopped just because I was just so broke, you know, in the middle of college.
Yeah. I
moved away from my folks. I was out west, out in Albuquerque. And I just, you know, it was literally like, how am I going to eat this week? I remember there was a 25 cents pizzas in like a 7-Eleven, and we would buy, and me and my roommates were like, don't you touch my, like, you know, we were getting like that, buying Top Ramen and stuff. Yeah. And then once, believe it or not, I started dating a girl who owned a comic book store, and she would sell them to me for cost. So then it was just like I was back to buying comic books all, you know. And it was funny because I was her kid's kindergarten teacher, and so she would come and pick up her kid and hand me my comics.
Was she suspicious? You guys go out on a few dates, and
I
what
didn't
do you?
know. That's the
Oh,
funny thing.
she goes back to your place
Yes,
and sees all the
she asked
comics.
me out, and we went on a date to a Chinese restaurant that was right next door to her comic book store. And I was like, "Oh, there's a comic book store." And she's like, "Oh, yeah, what do you think of that?" And
Oh
I was like,
man.
"Oh man, and I figured go for broke. I was never one of these guys that lied to girls. I just figured get it over. They're gonna hate me. Let's get it over with. So she was like, "Oh, that's my store," and I was like, "Yeah, that's funny. You almost had me believing that." And lo and behold, that was her store.
Wow. I mean, if you had to dip out any time, 90s is probably the time to dip out for a little bit.
I know RJ from the Fourth Age. He said he stopped with Heroes Reborn,
Oh,
and I got to
man.
say, I was tempted. I was tempted. As a matter of fact, I think I quit Marvel, and I didn't buy Marvel again until after Heroes Reborn was done, and then I ended up buying most of them again because at that point I was just like it was bothering me that I wasn't buying comics.
Yeah, there was that period where, unfortunately, there was the Image stuff, and it was fine, whatever. But then it influenced the Marvel stuff, and then the Marvel artists started to draw, just
Even at the time, I wasn't a fan of Image.
yeah. I was also a poor college kid, so there's a good 4 year chunk where it was the same thing. Do I eat or do I buy a comic or?
Yeah, yeah. It was my friend Larry opened up well, I became friends with him from the comic book store, but he opened up a comic book store, and I'm trying to remember what year it was, but I remember I was so excited. Like, oh my god, a store that only sells comic books! Like this was unbelievable. It was called The Incredible Pulp, and as far as I know, it was the first comic book store on Long Island, and I was like my stomach hurt. I wanted to go there so bad, and I remember the day it opened. I borrowed my friend Tommy's bicycle, and I rode there, and I put the bicycle on the ground, and there was 100 bicycles outside, and we were just like walking around, and we're like, I'll never forget. He had the glass counter in the front, Fantastic Four #1, Amazing Fantasy #15, X-Men, and they were $60 a piece. And I just remember going, "Oh, that might as well have been $1 million."
Wow.
I was like, "Oh my god, who would ever spend $60 on a comic book?" And then I walked home, and Tommy's bicycle got stolen.
I mean, if you were growing up and living in New York, in my head, I mean, you should have had access to like the cream of the crop.
As far as comics,
Yeah,
well, once that comic book store opened up, I had access to every freaking
yeah,
comic. But it's not that I didn't have access to DC. I didn't like DC. I like the characters. I like Superman. Superman's still my favorite superhero of all time. I like Batman, but let's face it. Like in 1974, when you bought a Superman comic book, it was just like somebody stole my cape, and I have to go to the
yeah.
moon. Batman. I still had the Neil Adams stuff, so Batman was kind of cool. And forget about Wonder Woman. So I just didn't like them, and I'm learning now that how wrong I was with like all the Western and war comics. They were phenomenal. Like I'm reading Jonah Hex now that came out, and they are some of the best comics ever. But I wasn't interested in cowboys in war. To me, comic books were for superheroes because TV and movies did cowboys and war movies the best. You didn't really need flying laser beams and stuff.
Yeah, I saw the Jonah Hex review, which brings me back to your channel. So, doing these reviews, how do you select what books you're going to do? Do you,
Well,
like you said, you're interested in westerns now, so are you going to sort of like mine your books for
well
westerns? Or?
I'm an impulsive person, so like if I'm buying a lot of comics because of this channel, but it started out I was just going to do comics that really, really stuck in my memory. So if I could think about it all day long, I would come home from work and pull out a comic. And I have a stack over here that's all that. But every once in a while, I'll just read something because I've been buying a lot of back issues. I'm like, oh my god, this is amazing, and I just turn on the camera, like the Jonah Hex stuff. That I only started buying Jonah Hex since I started doing the channel. But like, if you look at my early videos, I can't watch them. I was so shy. I would tell my wife to go upstairs. I would whisper into the camera, like I was so embarrassed to do everything. But like, I did some really good stuff. I'm thinking about redoing them. Like I did Fantastic Four #1, the Avengers #1, X-Men #1. And I'm like, and Johnny Storm, yeah, and the camera was shaking because I was nervous, I, all of a sudden you start to get comfortable. I like to think that I could talk now, but I got to do those old stuff. But how do I do it? I don't know. Like, if I can't think of anything, I have a pile of older comics from my childhood that I really, really like. But if I just read something and I'm excited and I just finished it and I was like, I'm doing this. Like I did that with Horace H. Hoover. I read it. I was really excited, and I think I messaged you because it was brand new. I try not to showcase anything that's brand new because I'm not a pirate website. I don't want to give people away the comp. And judging by that person starving to death behind you, it looks like you need the money. So
definitely.
But,
So, speaking of which, you said that if you can't stop thinking about a book from your childhood or something like that, on rereads now, like, do you see a difference? Does it feel just like nostalgia, or can you clearly see, okay, this actually has value?
yeah, the example that just popped into my mind was like on Sundays I do what I call Sunday comics, and I'll do like an annual or 4-issue miniseries, and I plan on talking for an hour live, so people will interact with me. It's turned out to be pretty fun, and I just did Avengers Annual number 7. That was when Adam Warlock was killed by Thanos, and then the final defeat of Thanos. It was part 1 of the final, and I loved it even more looking through it again. I'm like, that was a Michael Golden artwork, and what am I talking about? It was Jim Starlin artwork and Jim Starlin writing it, and Joe Rubes did inks, and it was grander and more epic and better than I remembered it as a kid. Like I think I appreciated the writing a little bit more. Adam Warlock. Oh, did you just lose me?
No, you're good.
The screen went blank because I haven't touched the screen in 5 minutes. I liked it even more. A couple weeks before that, it did Avengers Annual 10, the first appearance of Rogue. That was Michael Golden, and it was better than I remembered it. It started out with Carol Danvers trying to commit suicide, jumping off the bridge because of events that happened in Avengers 200. Stuff that I didn't like. Hey, what happened in Avengers 200? And like as a kid, I read it. I'm like, oh yeah, she married this guy, and then like, oh yeah, that guy Go read Avengers 200. It's too creepy to even contemplate as an adult, but it's so much better. One of my first showcases was a Fantastic Four 186 because that was my first Fantastic Four comic, and I reread it before doing the video, and I was like a little kid again. I was all excited,
It's funny. I mean, it is such a unique skill to be able to write, draw, make a comic book that a kid can enjoy and an adult can go back and reread. There's just something amazing about that. I don't know if there's something special about comics. I don't know if you could read a book in the same way, that covers like you being a 10-year-old and a 40-year-old. Well, I guess I'm sure there are.
You can. The Harry Potter books, I don't know if you read those, but they're for little kids. But I read them as an adult, obviously. I thought they were wonderful. She explained the world of politics to little kids. She explained and at the same time, it was like a boy who was too shy to hit on a girl. And, I thought she did a great job. I'm a big fan of all ages, material, comics, movies. And I think that's something that comic books are losing sight of. It's almost like your drug dealer. You gotta rope them in while they're young. And do you know anybody? Do you have a large family? Do you have friends with kids? Are they reading comics?
I have 3 older brothers. They all have kids, so I have a fair amount of nieces and nephews, and some of them have gotten into comics, which is great.
Oh, good.
Now, I'll tell a little story. I recently, about a month or so ago, I went to this high school and did like a demo, like an art demo for the day to show Horace H. Hoover and how you draw a comic book and all this. And as each class came in, I asked if anybody was, read comic books. And I would say out of 120 people, maybe 3 was reading comic books. So that hurt a little bit for sure. Now, admittedly, I don't know if they consider webtoons comics or manga.
Manga. They're probably my niece is reading manga, and her kid. So my niece and my grandniece, or great niece, whatever they're called, they're talking to me. Uncle John, do you know about One Punch Man? And my sister's children all read manga. None of them read comic books.
I wonder why that is.
Well,
It's
because for a couple of reasons. First, they're good. I missed out on manga. I was too old. There was a I don't know if you remember, but there was like in the late '80s there was a movement to bring manga to America. With Lone Wolf and Cub and Area 88 and
mhm.
My the Psychic Girl, and I love them. And then that just fizzled out, and then that was it. And now but you could get like a whole book, the whole self-contained story for not really that expensive. And then they got these wonderful cartoons, so all the kids I know are watching these cartoons,
Yeah.
and then their friend is like, "Yeah, but have you read the manga?" And then they feel stupid, and then they read the manga. Hello, Bilbo. Hello, Blake. Just saying
Oh,
hello. And the art style is phenomenal.
hey Blake.
And maybe I don't know manga, but
Hey
is
Bilbo.
it generally like mostly one person's vision?
So the thing about manga that I think is interesting, I mean, obviously the biggest difference to me is the art style, and I've always sort of like hung all of my hopes on the art in American comics. So whenever I think about some of like the old comics that I love, I think about the art, whether it's Simonson or Ron Frenz or whoever. So in my head, I'm like, would I like the Simonson run if it was super simplified and black and white and line art and wasn't Walt Simonson? I mean, I don't know.
Well, I know that I stopped collecting Thor when Simonson stopped drawing it, and it was Sal Buscema, and then I bought them later on in back issue bins. But so yeah, that the answer to me is no.
Yeah,
It was the same
exactly.
writer.
So that's why for me, whenever I hear manga, it's like it's cheap. I get that, and the stories might be really good, but to me, I don't know if I could get over the artwork. But that is a style thing or a subjective kind of thing.
For the longest time, I was just like, manga is just stupid. They all got the big eyes and stuff. But I remember one of my friends in college was getting me into Fist of the North Star. It was the first time I saw like really like violent and super kinetic manga. I still never read it, but it made me realize that I was wrong about it.
I remember this must have been mid '90s or something like that. I was introduced to anime, before manga. So there was a couple of movies like Ninja Scroll and obviously Akira,
Yeah,
and
Akira.
it was a big deal at the time. It really felt like something new. But then you dip your toe into the lower budget, not so good anime, and it just becomes like okay, you can flip a coin and it's going to be
Yeah, well,
not great.
for every Lion King, there's a million little
Yeah.
cheap knockoffs. So I don't hold that against. I remember the same thing. Akira, I saw in the movies. It was like a midnight movie
Hmm.
cult thing, and then I saw Ghost in the Shell, which I didn't particularly like, and then
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what else, but there was all the Studio Ghibli I really really liked. I remember taking my nieces and nephews when they were babies to the movies. So like I've always kind of liked anime, but I
Yeah.
wouldn't consider myself a fan. Like
Yeah.
yeah.
So out of with your reviews and your collection, I know this is the easiest and hardest question in the world to ask.
What is your favorite comic?
No, I will get to that though. Like, what do you think makes a good comic?
Well, well, it has to look good, and as I get older, I think as a kid I couldn't articulate it, but believe it or not, I think the best you need good storytelling in a comic book. More, well, let's be realistic. If the art is garbage, if the writing is garbage, then the good storytelling doesn't matter. But you need a good story, you need good art. But the way I look at it is Howard Chaykin is the perfect example of this.
Hmm.
If you were to remove like Howard Chaykin's art is beautiful, especially that American flag stuff, but it's so hard to read because it's almost like a collection of photographs. And if I've given Howard American flag to friends, and they were like, I can't follow the
Hmm.
story, but like you could give like a Steve Ditko Spider-Man or a John Romita Spider-Man or whatever, and like me as a kid, I could follow along the story without reading. And I think I'm talking about for children anyway. That more than anything is going to get a kid excited because they're gonna look at the pictures, they're gonna pose, they're gonna see Spider-Man swing into the bank, and then they're gonna be for an adult. Um, it's got to have a good story, the writing has to catch you. It doesn't even have to be unique, because like let's face it, how many for decades Moon Knight was just inferior Batman, and I
Yeah.
still loved it, but comic books are always copying each other. It's in some respect, but like a neat angle. But it has to be good art. It has to be. They have to respect their audience too. Like Jim Shooter always used to say that every comic book is somebody's first, and so they kind of explain everything. They catch you up to speed, but at the same time, they don't treat you like a dummy. Like the dialogue makes will catch you up, and they'll like I'm having a difficult way explaining this, but like to make a good comic book, let me to start all over. Good morning, the Moon Knight slander. I just got you losing subscribers. That's good. I just lost Twitter. I'm on a roll this week. I think, again, storytelling. It has to have good storytelling. You have to have continuity from panel to panel to page to page to page, because that is the bread and butter of comic books. Without that, you're not doing a comic book. It's sequential art. It has to be a nice sequence. That way you could get the people who read casually. You have to have like respect the audience in that you don't treat them like idiots. You don't like I remember now I can't remember. It was a particular Atlas comic, and the superhero was just standing there going like, we need to get this, and like the word balloon was so big, like they were explaining all the motivations and everything like that, and we were just laughing at it, like who this is written for. Like they just assume like we're stupid.
Yeah.
And then go ahead.
Just a comment about the storytelling. It's interesting you say that about Howard Chaykin. I read recently The Tomb of Dracula, and I had read a book once in a while, but not. I wanted to get the collected just to see, if I missed something. And I'll be honest, Gene Colan is one of my favorite. Or not Gene Colan.
Gene Colan did
who did Dracula? I'm blanking on the artist name.
Not Gene.
No, Gene Colan did.
Yeah, Gene Colan did.
Yeah, okay.
He actually petitioned to do that because he doesn't particularly like superheroes.
And beautifully illustrated, but there were definitely pages where I'm like, I'm not sure what's going on, and I had to backtrack and look at the panel. I'm like, did I miss a page?
Yeah.
And as soon as that happens, it pulls you out immediately.
Yeah, it's. I always say it's disjointed. Like I remember, like the first 15 issues of Tomb of Dracula, it was on the verge of cancellation. It was tough to read, and the fact that every issue, it was like an ensemble story. The only common thread was Dracula.
Yeah.
So you didn't know what was going on, and then the next issue it was completely different characters. Yeah. And then Marv Wolfman finally took it over and had a cast of characters to follow along the story. But I know what you're saying, yeah, because Gene Colan is like, it's like a fine artist more than a comic book.
Yeah, I mean, they're beautifully drawn.
Oh, beautiful. But like, again, like you're looking at this panel and you look at this panel and you're like, there's no. You're an artist. Is the word continuity between the two?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like,
and there's a lot of ways to approach that. And as far as old comics versus new comics, and maybe that's the next topic. One thing that I am trying to sort of pull from the old comics, and when I say old comics, that means comics to me.
Right. When you say old comics, you mean good comics.
Yeah, so I'm talking about at least Bronze Age. Like, to me, that is comics. And whenever I'm looking at them and reading, the comics that I have, the density of storytelling, because they would do 7, 8, 10 panels in a page, so they wouldn't drop frames in order to blow something up. They made sure that you knew exactly what was happening. Thor is throwing the hammer, it's turning around, it's coming through a brick wall. So they weren't afraid to use a lot of panels if they needed to convey that storytelling. And to me, that's one of the biggest things that I see, from the comics that I love and sort
Nothing
of hold.
happens.
Yeah.
Nothing happens in one particular issue. It's funny that you said that, because just this Sunday, when I was doing that Avengers Annual 7, one of the comments was, "Is this all one comic?" Like this is all happening in one comic. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, go read any, just at random, grab a Fantastic Four from 1 to 100, and just pay attention to what is going on, how much stuff happens. Johnny Storm and Ben Grimm fight over something like that. Reed and Sue go off to have a domestic adventure, and then next thing you know, the mailman shows up, and then Annihilus attacks, and then the bad guy gets the upper hand, and then they get the upper hand, and then everything gets resolved, and then some sort of setup for the next issue happens, all in one comic. That's like 6 issues in the modern world.
Yeah, and as much as we talk about how modern comics have too much dialogue, it's not that older comics didn't have dialogue.
They had a lot of dialogue.
A lot. I mean, they crammed it in there. They covered up with people's faces. They didn't care.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, it never reduced the reading experience ever.
Only a few times can I think of, Chris Claremont comes to mind, as a
yeah, I mean,
got paid by the word.
But I don't think back on those books, and think, oh, I don't want to reread it because of that.
They were never a chore.
Yeah, exactly. So if you sort of have a priority list then of sort of, things to make a good comic book, storytelling, visual storytelling is at the top, regardless of style or anything like that.
I mean, it goes without saying, you got to have good writing, you got to have good art,
right?
And then you got to have storytelling. Without the storytelling, it's not a comic book. It's like, I guess, like an art book or storybook with pictures, because that's unique to comic books.
Yeah, I bought a Steranko. It's like an illustrated book, basically. I can't think of the name of it. Chandler. And it's like this detective, but it really is like an illustrated book. It's not a comic book. It's really interesting, but it doesn't work as a comic book. So I mean, I don't mind experimenting with the medium at all. Speaking of which, what are some books that you've read out of your 58,000 that are unique? Because I look back, like at least at my collection, and there's some standouts for sure. But is there a particular run, a particular artist that you can hold, like, and you don't have to pick your favorite, but just something that comes to mind?
Comics that'll always come back to over and over again is obviously the Claremont Byrne Austin X-Men. Those are like the pinnacle of American superhero comic books. If you want to get into American superhero comic books as a creator, I think that is just essential. You're really gonna not do yourself any favors if you got to know about them, you got to read them. Those are the blueprint. Then there's like I really like Garth Ennis's Hitman. That is one of my favorite series of all time, and I could see some people don't like it, but this is a comic that he pushed the character, and DC told him no, because he was a hitman in Gotham City. So they're like, what are his superpowers? He's like, he doesn't have superpowers because Garth Ennis hates. So he gave him telepathy and X-ray vision. What a great set of powers for him. But the first 10 issues, it's the Punisher, tongue-in-cheek Punisher. But then after that, I think they left him alone, and it blossomed. There's some of those comics that'll break your heart. The story of Tommy Monahan's mother, issue 30, 35, 36. I get teary-eyed when I think about them. I remember telling my wife the story, and I was like, getting choked up. I don't want to spoil it for anybody. Please do yourself a favor and pick these comics up. And then issue 34, where Tommy meets Superman, is the most poignant comic book. That's the comic I bought the most copies just to give to other people when they go,
wow.
Why do you like comics? I go, here, read this. It's Hitman. I think it's Hitman 35. It's Hitman and Superman. And then there's, right after that, Tommy's mother, the next story is the silliest, stupidest, laugh out loud, obscene, childish comic book ever. And I love it because Garth Ennis just did whatever he wanted, and that's then what other who said I was a Moon Knight slander? I love the Doug Bunch and Bill Sienkiewicz first 20 issues of Moon Knight. I reread those over and over again. the artwork in those are amazing.
Yeah.
To me, that was like what Batman should have been, because at that time Batman was like, let's go to the moon. I lost my utility belt.
Yeah. Sienkiewicz, yeah, he's one of the most unique artists to work in sort of mainstream comics, without a doubt. I can't think
Yeah.
of. I mean, later on, maybe Sam Keith, somebody like that might have
Oh yeah.
been, but that was 15 years later, maybe. I don't know,
Yeah.
even more than that. Going back to the Hitman thing, which I've never read, which I will
Oh
absolutely read now.
yeah. It's
Um,
one of my favorites. Yeah.
that's one of the things I always think about. You know, the difference between like drama, tragedy, humor, and sort of the mix of all of that. And I know I saw something recently. You know, the Marvel humor in movies doesn't land, and it'll ruin the dramatic parts. You know, what are your thoughts on just that idea of like mixing humor with tragedy? Should you stay like serious to drive something home, or at least what have you observed?
Well, let me put it this way: we all saw Shaun of the Dead, right?
Yep.
That is phenomenal. It's a great movie, and there is a couple of scenes in that movie that'll break your heart. That's don't shoot my mom. Get that gun away from my. His mom's
Yeah.
to his arm, and you're like, and then there's other scenes where you're laughing. Why? Because those people were talented. They could pull it off. So I'm not going to say don't have humor in your serious movie, but these jokes in the Marvel movie, they're not funny.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse. I challenge you to go to a bad stand-up comedian and not come home enraged. I keep trying to write scripts for comics, and I was talking with friends about this, and I was like, nothing's funny. I can't write funny. It's too hard. Comedy is difficult. You have to be talented. Like if you're writing horror and it's not that scary, you wrote a drama. you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
but the Marvel movie, I got a couple of jokes. Like I remember in the Avengers, like it was kind of like, hey, camaraderie, guys in the military, they're fighting, and they made a quip, and it was kind of funny. But now it's just like, as soon as something tension happens, they make a joke right away. And
Yeah.
like what was that? Love and Thunder. It was terrible.
Yeah. When I think back of all the comics I've read, obviously it might not compare, but it's definitely I love the mix, but I love British humor, and
yeah.
like I think speaking of Shaun of the Dead, you can work that into like a dramatic story much easier than like quippy physical humor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
What's like Hot Fuzz?
Oh,
Anything Hot Fuzz? Like they make a joke. He had a big long beard. They're talking about the previous cop.
great big bushy beard. I love
And then
that
later
movie.
on, you see a dead body with the big beard, and I was like, oh my god, that joke is like a horror. Like that's when you start to realize that, And I keep going back to what's his name, Sean. Why can't I think of the actor's name now? But and the director Edgar Wright.
Simon Pegg.
Simon Pegg, yeah, they're geniuses.
Yeah.
What's his name? If you ever watch like a Afterlife with Ricky Gervais, it's about a guy who lost his wife to cancer and he wants to kill himself. It is, you'd think it would be the most depressing movie in the world, but he decides, I'm just going to tell people exactly what I think now, because and then I'm going to kill myself.
Yeah.
So he's going around like making jokes, and then he's by himself and he's crying, and it works. So yes, you can have drama, you can have comedy, but you better be talented. I'm not saying you can't do it. You can obviously do it. But,
Yeah.
what Nate says, any favorite indie comics, old or new? Oh yeah. What do you consider indie comic? Like the Kickstarter? There's this company called Alterna that makes some pretty good comics.
Yeah, I know Nate. Nate.
The creators are
Yeah.
kind of sketchy, but the comics are pretty good.
Yeah. You have anything? I mean, obviously, besides Alterna and things you'll be forced to say.
Yeah, I'm not even forced. I'm an unabashed Alterna fanboy, and by that I mean I get anything by Alterna puts out. Why not? First off, they're cheap. Second off, they're or should I say inexpensive. Second off, they're on newsprint. They look like how comic books should be. They're I remember seeing them at the store, and I was like, what is this? Is this from a bygone age? Why don't I know this comic? No, it's brand new. I was like, give me all of these. I always had a thing as a kid. If I had $10, I wanted 10 comics. Once you get 10, so
that ended a while ago.
Yeah. What was I?
Any indie comics? I mean, not right now either. Like, as you're collecting Marvel and DC, any, like when Dark Horse appeared or Image, or not that those are indie, but they were. Yeah, they were. Or I guess Vertigo. I mean, I don't know what we want to call indie, but anything outside the like mainstream that.
Yeah, well, I already mentioned alternative. If Dark Horse is indie, I love Usagi Yojimbo. That's one of the comics that I look forward to every month. I'm trying to look over here, like of comics that are on my current to read pile. Oh, here's something that's new that I really like. Jeez, why can't I? It's not coming up, but it's Dark Horse, Blue Book. It's okay. About alien abductions. I read the first issue and man, did I love it. This is Battle of Destiny. It's Chuck Dixon writing about Joshua and Jericho from the Bible. This just right now. It's a golden age. You could. I'm moving all these Marvel comics because we all know those. J.M. DeMatteis just did 4 comics on Kickstarter that I picked up. Don Chin mailed me Scorpion.
Oh, cool.
It's pretty cool.
So what do you think is the biggest difference between the indie books and not necessarily current mainstream, but just in general? Like,
for the most part, an indie book has to be good because it doesn't have Disney money or Warner Brothers money behind it. If you're gonna like we got Logan Effling in the chat right here. He's making a comic. He's making a comic called Firewatch. It's out of his own pocket, so he's not gonna. He's going to make what he thinks is the best thing going that he can, or otherwise he's going to be wasting his money. That's why I think like a lot of these, especially the Kickstarter comics, like kind of more excited about that because this is people, who love comics. They love it so much that they're paying out of pocket to do it. Taking a huge risk.
Yeah, and
than I can afford at this point.
As far as those comics, what is the biggest? It's like a new genre popping up. You know what I mean? Obviously there's superheroes, and then you have like sort of noir crime thrillers. Is there something that you can?
Genres going on right now.
Yeah, because I can't see like one specific kind. It really does seem like there's just one of everything, and then more.
It's a weird time. Like I think we're in a flux time as far as comic books because I see like Marvel and DC, their sales are going down. The more and more people that I talk to that are comic fans, especially like my group of comic fans, they're like, yeah, I don't buy them anymore. Yeah, I don't like them. I don't even watch the movies anymore. I haven't watched Secret Invasion, but at the same time, we're still excited and talking about comic books, and they're recommending this Indiegogo comic, and they recommended this little independent from a comic book store. Not everything is Indiegogo and it kicks, and I'm like, oh wow, and we do like a couple of us who all work together in the comic store. We went to a diner a couple of weeks ago, and we were just like interrupting each other. Yeah, but have you read this? And yeah. So there is that excitement, but part of me wonders like, is it sustainable? Like, how many people are going to the internet? Like, you need. Nobody's walking into a comic book store out of the blue. Like they wake up, they go to work, they come home, and they're just like, comic book store. I think I'm going to go to a comic book store. Like you're going into a comic book store because you already want comics. So
yeah,
that I do believe that the direct market was the first nail in the coffin of comic book sales. Once they got everything off the newsstand, and I do now. Even less people are just going to go, you know what? I'm going to go on the computer and research and find out if there's any comic books that I could buy. Only comic book people are doing that. And let's face it, look at me. I look like Gandalf over here. There's no young bloods buying it and doing it.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, so I've been on the internet since the internet started, and by that I mean,
That's
doing
your job. Yeah.
development. Yeah, that's my job. So I'm always on the internet. And I never looked for comics online ever. I was still the guy that went into the comic book shop looking for comics up until 2 years ago when I got on Twitter.
Yeah.
Before that, that was still me. I would look
And you're
quickly at
and
the.
you're in the comic book field.
Well, yeah, up until then, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's just it seemed like I want to go into a comic book shop. I quickly scan the covers. Does any art pique my interest? I flip through it and then I buy it, and that was kind of my mindset up until very recently.
But you also loved comics your whole life. It's not
Yes.
like I'm trying to think like I don't know. I'm trying to think of like an esoteric interest. Like yeah, I don't know. Like hey, I'm gonna
Like
wake up. I'm gonna go to an origami store.
like glass blowing. Or
I know
something.
that's like a silly thing, but people don't.
Yeah.
And there's like 3 comic book stores around by my house. I always strike up conversations with them, and they all say the same thing. It's all my age within give or take 10 years of buying comics.
Yeah.
There's no little kids walking in, mommy, I want Spider-Man.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are ways that new comic book artists can kind of help with that. I don't think like we said, online isn't the way. It'll get interest in current community of comic book artists, but young people that have never thought about comic books aren't going to do that. That's why going to that school was really interesting to me. I'm hoping that I left there, getting a few people interested in comics, maybe. And actually, this came up quite a few times when I asked who collects comics. Nobody. They're like, we don't even know where to buy comics. They
Right.
actually said that they didn't know
Right.
where to buy comics. So
Right. Yeah. And
we got.
I mean, where do you buy magazines? Let's be realistic. I want to get People magazine. I don't even see them at supermarkets anymore.
Yeah,
You know,
maybe a
you know,
giant
where do you
giant
buy a
grocery store,
newspaper?
maybe. Yeah,
Like
exactly.
there's a guy I work with every day. He has a newspaper, and I joke, "Where did you even get that newspaper?" Well, he has a subscription. Well, you know, and then I said, "Well, what if he didn't have a subscription?" He's like, "I don't know.
Yeah,
I grew up reading manga and still don't know it until someone." Yeah, yeah. It's kind of he grew up
yeah,
reading manga. It's a shame. Like Stan Lee, when Stan Lee died, I made this analogy before, but Stan Lee was the Fisher King of comics. Like, or better example is that movie Excalibur. The health of the king is the health of England. Well, the health of Stan Lee was the health of the comic book. When he
yeah,
died, who else is on Johnny Carson? Johnny Carson, there's a dated reference. Who's on late night talk show talking about comic books? Like my
yeah,
brother's a big motorcycle guy, and when he saw Stan Lee, he was like, oh my God, and he hadn't bought a comic book in 30, 35 years at that point, but he knew Stan. Who now? Nobody's being the event. Like right now, I'm looking, you got about 10 people in the chat. Guys,
really?
let me know. Do you know who CB Cebulski is? Do you know what he looks like? He I'll wait 2 seconds. He's the editor-in-chief of Marvel. He has Stan Lee's position.
Yeah,
And where is this guy? Why isn't he on I was about to say Jay Leno. It shows you how. Why isn't he on Fallon talking about comic books? Comic book movies are in the movie theaters.
yeah,
And the guy who runs Marvel Comics, isn't known. Comic Shock's kind of had a reputation of not being very inviting to anybody who wouldn't tell you. Yeah, Blue Teddy, I can't disagree
yeah,
with you. I can't disagree with you.
yeah. I'm sorry. The one thing that always kept people I know is I don't know where to start. Like, what issue do I buy? There's 8 runs of Thor and they restart. That was a big
Yes.
problem.
Yes, that OCD in me is just so mad that I had Thor every issue from Journey to Mystery 83, and now they never had a 1,000th issue, and then when they like there should be like 1 or 2 comics of if Spider-Man's big enough to have 1 or 2 comics, and then that's it. Make those comics as best as possible. If you want to have a Spider-Woman, that's it. But to have like 14 different Spider-Mans now, and now they have different costumes and they're different identities, it's like dilutes Spider-Man. And it just shows me how desperate they are, because that's the only thing that sells. So we got purple Spider-Man, we got green Spider-Man, and everybody's
That's what it is. Well,
Yeah.
like Batman, it's like it's snowsuit Batman, and it's taking one character and doing every variation of that character. Although it's a good place to announce Horace H. Hoover, if there is a multiverse, he'll be exactly the same in every universe. So
I was kind of hoping for like desert camo.
yeah.
I keep saying Horace H. Harding and saying the wrong name. Horace H. Hoover. That would be cool. Like a what about like little Horace, and he's got like a little baby like a dust devil on his head.
So I did want to ask you. You were talking about wanting to write your own stories.
Yeah.
Are they going to be comic books? And if so, are you going to use that Byrne Claremont run as your, not template, but is that going to be your
I can't help it because they're burned into my memory. You know what I mean? So like, if I could get 100th as good as those, then it'll be a success. I have a bunch of comic book story ideas, and I have some scripts written. I submitted one script that I'm going to keep under wraps because we don't know how long it's going to take to be done, and whatever things might change, and I don't want to jinx it. I'm in the works of hiring an artist now for one story, and but to be honest, my nature is I have a lot of momentum. So when I'm going, I go, and when I'm stopped, it takes a lot. So I'm my own worst enemy. But as far as what do I want to do? I want to be like Jack and Stan. I think that they pioneered it. They perfected it, and I think that's like attainable. Like Will Eisner to me is on another. I'll never make it to that level. And I'm not talking about the art, and I'm not talking about, but I'm talking about like accessibility. Like can you pick up my one issue, read it, and be like, that was cool. That was a fulfilling, satisfying meal all by itself. Because that's what I want to do. I want if you're going to take time out to buy my comic book, who knows how much it'll cost? Who knows it'll even happen? But I want you to get that one thing and be like, all right, that was a beginning, that was a middle, that was a conclusion, and then maybe if you get the third issue, you realize that maybe I wove in a little subplot over here. But if you don't get the third issue, it was still satisfying. And I think that's kind of killing comic books because I blame Michael Bendis for that. The whole deconstruction. He was ground zero for the death of the comic book industry.
I promised I wasn't going to be negative, and I will say nothing about Brian Michael Bendis. Nothing at all.
Okay.
So
okay.
I'm saying nothing. But as far as like the one-off issues, I think if, like you talked about momentum, if the comic book indie industry can get that momentum, then we can look down the future and say, you know what, I can plan 7 issues ahead because it'll still be around. But for me, the 5-issue miniseries with Horace is like, will I be around? Will it be around in 5 issues? I feel like that it has that momentum. So yeah, we can start like an ongoing series. But I think for quite a bit, they're lucky to get a miniseries and then it's over.
I tell me what you think about this idea. But I've been thinking about this. In my job at work right now, I spend a lot of time alone. Nobody wants to be around me. So I was thinking, like, is this I'm not a business person. Is this a logical thing, like, to start up a company that makes comics, like more than just a Kickstarter? Like they'll do the printing, they'll do the distribution. So like, whatever, Phil Smith could make his comic book, Hero Man, do everything, write everything, get draw it if he can, or collaborate with an art, and then send all the files to John's comic book company, and then we print it, we ship it, we'll have like an Indiegogo or whatever, and then it's almost like a comic book company for everybody. I don't know, is that, because I think that's like the hardest thing. I know Logan's doing his own comic book. Like I because I could write a story and I could hire
Yeah.
hire an artist. I've got artist friends, that we could collaborate. But then what? Like, Gene Simmons from Kiss once he was being interviewed, and some guy called up and said, "Hey, Gene, I want to do everything in my band." And Gene's like, "That's commendable." He goes, "Yeah, I write songs, I play guitar, I sing." He goes, and I don't want the record company to tell me what to do. And so Gene, he goes, hold it right there. He goes, "I don't know you," but he goes, "But I'll," with that arrogance that only Gene Simmons has. He goes, "I don't know you, but I will accept that you're a good guitarist. I will accept that you're a good songwriter, and I'll accept that you're a good singer. But are you a good promoter? Are you a good lawyer?
Yeah.
Are you a good stagehand? Are you all of the?" And then Gene Simmons goes, "Even I can't do all those things." So hire yourself a lawyer, hire yourself an agent, hire a manager, and so I don't know, like can that be done?
I don't know. I'll be honest. I don't.
And I wonder if that's like get Ethan Van Sciver and all those guys, like Young Ripper. He just made millions. Like you make the company that makes it easy for others, and of course they're going to be like, "I don't want John's comic. This is garbage. This will only," which I think would be good, because then it'll force you to have some standards, and then the next customer will be like, "That's a good company." They made.
With traditional publishing and distribution and all of that changing, it might have some unique form later on. That I don't know. I'm so focused on just like creating horse. I do want to mention about the Brian Michael Bendis thing. My comment meant that I agree with you more than I can say.
I know. Being negative. I try not to be negative on my channel, but I'm human and I do stumble. But and if I talk about a comic book that I don't like, I like to say that it's because I'm trying to make a point. But
I was just joking. You weren't being like negative. I was just saying you would hear a rant from me. That's all.
Let's hear the rant. Let's hear the rant.
No,
I can't be the only one.
That would be a really bad rant.
Just that smug face, and I just want to smack him. How's that for not being negative?
I will agree, though. He for me, he ruined comics, like straight up.
Yeah, he's patient zero. He's patient zero.
Yeah, he ruined them without a doubt. Not to be too subtle about that. Yeah, what else? Have we covered everything? Did you want to talk about anything?
Do you think? Because obviously I love comics. I was in 2015. If I'll be negative to make a point, I stopped getting Marvel and I stopped getting DC cold turkey. And the story I always tell about that is the month before that, I spent like $400 on comics, and this big box came because I was getting them from the discount comic book service, and my wife just happened to be coming home from work as this box was being delivered. So the UPS, and we have to walk up 3 flights of stairs. I was living in an apartment at the time, and she couldn't carry the box. The box was ripping, and she was freaking out because she's like me. She wants everything to be in mint condition. We're both kind of collectors and hoarders, of various things. So she was, and I'm upstairs like, I don't even know,
Yeah.
It happened to be my nephew was walking by. He lived in a building and helped her carry, and she was like teary-eyed, and I'm like, my wife is crying carrying a box of comic books up the stairs, and I don't even like these. And that was it. I honored what I already paid for, but that was, and now I keep telling my wife, my wife's over there showing me how big this box was. And every month now, I challenge myself to spend less and less on comics, and I guess that's not what you want to hear as a comic book creator, but don't worry, you made the cut.
No, it just means that I have to make sure what I'm making is as good as I can make it, because I'm the same way. I'm a fan. I've always been a fan, and I think, I hope that shows in what I do. I take into account everything I've read my whole life and try to do something new. But yeah, you gotta earn those dollars. But yeah, like you said, spending $400 on books you don't really like. For me, eventually you just have to stop. As much as you love comic books, you don't like those particular books.
Right,
and,
right. I was like getting next to nothing for a while, and now I'm, I started buying more back issues at that point. And fill in holes in my collection and reread stuff.
Yeah.
And, and then, the pandemic happened and there was nothing to do but sit home and read comics after work.
Yeah.
I never stopped working. I was, construction guy. We had to keep going. So I would just sit home and read more. And I was like, there's nobody around to talk to anymore. That's why I started my channel, just to talk to nobody. But, now I'm talking to you. It's a success.
It's been fun. I mean, the reviews that you do, I always try to pop in because those are the books that I either would be reading or have read. So it's always good to get like a great view on that.
Out of curiosity, what do you like better? Like comics that if you watch my videos, do you like the comics that you have read, or do you like it when it's a comic that you have like, oh, we like the same thing?
Yeah. I like, as long as it's the same era. That way I'm like, oh, you know what? I've read other comics in that run around there. I'll go back and it's not too far, I like that. But honestly, like page by page breakdown and a review is really nice. Cause when I'm reading it by myself, it's just me by myself and people are always in your chat talking, which is always great.
Yeah. I'm really happy. I'm over the moon because I remember for like a year I was getting like 3 views a video, and I was getting like a little disheartened. My subscription rate wasn't subscribers, whatever it's called. I was like telling my wife I'm going to stop, and she was like, well, keep it up. She's very encouraging. I want to look at what Blue Teddy said over here about the comic shops. Had a reputation. Yeah, comic shops kind of had a reputation of not being very inviting to anyone who I remember, and I was just as bad, but I worked at the comic book store. I remember like people would buy like a comic that I didn't like at the time it was Arak, Son of Thunder, and somebody would buy it. And I was good enough not to say anything to their face, but I remember when they would leave, I'd talk, hey, you bought Arak. This guy doesn't know a good comic book, so yes. Yeah. And I'm just as bad as everybody because I was a 15, 16, 17-year-old kid at the time. But I remember I told you when I moved to Albuquerque, I dated the woman who owned a comic book store. She was like, that was her thing. She was charming to everybody who came in the store. It, to the point where it kind of backfired because every guy asked her out. You know what I mean? Because, but you have to sell. Whether you're a comic book creator, comic book seller, and I think that's something when I was talking about Stan Lee. He sold comics. Jack Kirby, in an interview, they said, what do you do for a living? And Jack Kirby said, I sell comic books. He never said I drew comic books. I write comics. He said I sell them. And I think people are forgetting that they got to be a salesman. Like, again, Dan Slott blocking everybody, Slotto Blocktavius, as they call him.
Yeah.
And Eric Larson. My wife is over here laughing on the other side of the camera because she used to make fun of me. She used to call me the Dan Slott fanboy because I went to comic convention and I was like, there he is. I was like a little kid. That's because I really liked his She-Hulk run. And I remember going over and like, she's like, just go talk to him. Just go talk. I was like, hello, Mr. Slott. And I have like 10 pictures of me and him hanging out. And, and then I get on Twitter and I'm blocked, and now I find out that he's like the biggest.
Yeah.
How is this selling comic books? How is this putting more comic books in people's hands by being a nasty person? Kirk Biasic resists on his Twitter profile for 40. What are you resisting? I thought you were trying to sell Astro City. And then I find out I'm blocked by him. And I used to tell people Astro City was my favorite comic book. And then I try to talk to the guy like, thank you for that. Oh, I'm blocked.
Yeah, that's crazy to me. I mean, the fact that somebody will buy my comic and take time to read it is wild to me still to this day, and I'm thankful. I mean,
a lot happened in your first issue, and I like the characters. Max is my favorite. If anything happens to Max, I can't come on your channel anymore.
Yeah,
Slurpee's an alien. He'll grow back.
All right, so we're at an hour. Okay, yeah, why don't you kind of like tell everybody kind of where to find you and whatnot, and then
okay. I have my own channel on YouTube. It's called John's Longbox. And what I do is, like I said, during COVID, things got a little weird, so I just started taking comic books and set up a webcam, and it was really terrible. And I would just talk about comic books from my collection. My rules are I have to like the comic unless I'm making a point, and I have to have read the comic and own the comic. So it's my personal comics, and I just want to talk about them. and I love interaction. I got to the point now where like every Wednesdays at 7 p.m. So tomorrow I have people on my channel, whether, and you don't have to be a creator. I've had a couple of people that just like comic books. Next week I have Chuck Dixon. Can you believe that? Chuck Dixon wants to come and talk to me.
That's amazing.
I have a couple of board game personalities coming on, and I talk. And then on Sundays, I do every Sunday at 10 Eastern Standard Time. I just have what I call Sunday comics. I have like breakfast, and we talk about comics for an hour. That's it. It's just
Awesome.
It's just nerd comic book fun hour, and everybody's polite. I've been doing it for like 3 years. There's never been a negative interaction. There's never been drama. You know, I'm really proud of it. Everybody's pretty cool. A lot of fun.
Yeah, super fun. Yeah, so as far as me, Horace H. Hoover is on Alterna. Issue 1, Issue 2 is on demand. Shipping soon, I believe. Yeah, issue 3 is in the can. The current Alterna campaign is for King Cryptid 5 to 9, so check that out. It's been doing great. Yeah. And yeah, I'll post videos here, interviews, and or like little drawings or live streams.
Yeah, I'm digging Horace H. Hoover. You know, for the fact that only one issue came out, and I'm like chomping at the bit to read it, just shows you.
I'm really excited about the other issues going in. Each issue, I'm kind of like reaching a different level. So
yeah,
hopefully
you hit all my buttons with that comic. So it was like, who's the audience? Well, me. This guy over here is the audience.
Awesome. I mean, some of that's been collecting for so long. That's
yeah, it's awesome. A good comic. Yeah. Alterna's hitting it out of the park. You know, Wolf and Batsy is phenomenal. Unit 44 is doing the difficult thing of actually being funny, and it's not just like culture references. It's actually funny from the situations. You know, I'd like to talk to Wes Locklear. And,
I'm trying to talk to him specifically about humor in comics. I thought that would be interesting. But yeah, I love Unit 44. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks everybody in the chat.
That's hitting my fantasy buttons. You know, it's so good. I'll keep talking. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, thanks everybody in the chat for popping in. I appreciate it. And thanks, John, for joining us.
Anytime.
Catch you guys later.
I enjoy talking to you. Thank you.
See ya.
Bye-bye.